Great. Okay. Well, thanks everyone for coming today for this 1 hour lunch and learn. The topic, obviously, you see in front of you, AI for good, solving problems in climate, health, and disaster management. This is a brief piece of research that myself did earlier in the year as part of my work on the Digital Pathfinders program, which is a program of delivery in the northeast of England for Sunderland Software City. This is our first webinar that we've ever delivered online. Joining myself today, uh, I'm Nathan Rowland. I'm joined by my partner in crime, Ben Mushin. You might have seen us at workshops before. We deliver quite a few in the region. We are digital adoption specialists, so we've been working on the Digital Pathfinders program for 4 years, pretty much almost dead on at this point. And I suppose why come and listen to us about this subject of AI for AI in general, as not just AI for good. We've been investigating its merit as a technology, I suppose, for about 2.5 years now. Strong opinions, both kind of like what it represents for businesses and organizations in terms of empowering them, but also conscious of the kind of wider societal economic impact it's having right now. And that is to an extent why I wanted to put on this talk this afternoon, was to kind of just share some of my own learnings from this 2.5 years in investigating this technology and its merit, as I said. So Ben, would you like to give the spiel about
Yeah,
Pathfinders because you're so well versed in it now?
sure. Thanks, Nathan. Yeah, so Nathan and I, we both work for Sunderland Software City. So Sunderland Software City is there to support the tech ecosystem, both regionally and as well as nationally. We operate in kind of four different pillars or verticals. We have skills programs to help people get skills to explore careers in STEM. So working down from, schools through to colleges, through to boot camps, that kind of thing. All about looking at digital skills and technology and stuff. We have startup programs to help people start businesses. We have business support or digital adoption programs such as Digital Pathfinders and Hearttree. And then we have immersive programs or innovation programs that's helping people explore immersive technologies, quantum computing, further, more complex AI than what we're talking about today. But as I say, we are there to kind of support the particularly the regional tech ecosystem. Digital Pathfinders is one of our flagship programs, so we've been running it for about 4 years now. We've been funded by the Northeast Combined Authority, so this program runs until March of next year. But over the course of the 4 years, we've supported probably close to 500 organisations now through all manner of digital interventions. It is fully funded support. Previously, it was just to Newcastle, Northumberland, North Tyneside. Now that we've thankfully got the devolvement of now NECA or Northeast Combined Authority, we're able to support businesses in Sunderland, County Durham, South Tyneside, and Gateshead as well. So we are starting to do that now. So as I say, we've run a series of workshops. We're running these webinars now online, but as of last week, we did a workshop in Sunderland on the topic of AI and automation. And the week before that, we delivered it in South Shields and Gateshead. We are looking to do another one in Newcastle. So if you're interested, then follow our page and keep up to date with our announcements and events on there, as well as track us on various social media channels as well. Or you can sign up to our newsletter and get our events as and when they're announced. In addition to this, we also do one-to-one support as well. So here's just a bit of a selection of some of the things which we do. As Nathan mentioned, we are digital adoption specialists, but really we see ourselves as generalists. We dabble in all manner of different tech verticals. And fundamentally, we're there to support you, entrepreneurs, business owners, charities, and social enterprises to adopt digital to overcome your challenges, to become more productive and more efficient. So basically, there's a lot of things we can kind of support with. That's not a totally exhaustive list. So if you have your own challenges or things like that, you'd like to explore how digital could kind of help with that, give us a shout or let us know. And you can register with the program just on the website. but yeah, that's the Digital Pathfinders program. So, but obviously we're delivering these webinars. You're obviously free to attend. So if you can go on the website and register, that would be great. Following on from the workshop, we obviously have your email based on the webinar link that you signed up to. We'll send back an evaluation link, and be really appreciative if you could just kind of give us feedback and let us know. Likewise, if there's any particular topics which you do want us to explore and talk about, whether it's delivered by myself, Nathan, or Chamath, or someone else in the team, or if we're pulling in external contacts and stuff who have really industry-specific domain experience, then let us know about that. We do have another one coming up on the 12th of November, in which case we're working with Mark from Vision for Access, where we're going to be looking at digital accessibility and how to ensure that your website and apps are inclusive and accessible for all. So that should be a really good one to look out for. We'll have that Eventbrite going live today, so we will share that as well. But as I say, check our website and sign up to our newsletter, and you'll receive any kind of future announcements in the future. But if you've got any suggestions in the future, just give us a shout, and we're happy to explore that. But that's enough of the plug of the program. We'll go back to Nathan, and then Nathan, if you can talk us through the talk of today. So AI for good. So what is it that you've been finding or learning about through your research?
Thanks so much, Ben. Couldn't have said it better myself. And what a great intro. I suppose just a couple caveats to this topic and to delivering it over a webinar format. This is the first time I've ever talked about this in a kind of public setting. I did this research earlier in the summer, um, and I'm not certain if I'll fill the full hour. Maybe that's generally sometimes quite a nice thing. You let you go a bit earlier. So I've put all this together based on my findings from a number of case studies over the past few months, and I'm just regurgitating that back to you now. Hopefully, so that you're all inspired about what this technology can do for us. Um, but also the reason for doing this in a webinar style format means that this session is being recorded so that we can hand it off to people who are also interested in the Digital Pathfinders program, interested in this subject matter, so they can watch it at a later date. I know some people had signed up, but just for various reasons couldn't make it here today. So we'll be sending that recording to them after the fact. But also for the people here who are here with us live, in Zoom webinar, there's a Q&A feature. It should be towards the bottom of the Zoom window. You're free to go in and ask questions at any time during the course of this webinar. Ben will be on hand answering questions there in the chat with you if something's like really burning. But equally, I have time dedicated towards the end of this webinar as well. If any questions you'd like me to specifically answer here during the session, and Ben will keep a track of that and let me know towards the end. Right, those are all the caveats. So AI for good. Why even talk about this subject matter at all? I think this is a pretty like soft take to say that it dominates the headlines. When I'm driving to the office, I have Channel 4 radio on most times, and like, it's Israel, it's AI. That's all I'm hearing about at the moment. So at least I can engage with AI. I'm lost whenever it comes to the conversations about Israel, but that obviously that's a different webinar. Um, but even still, the conversations tend towards the negative, and not unfairly so. This I believe this headline comes from the Telegraph last year, and as you can see, experts weighing in, it could wipe out humanity. A threat as bad as nuclear war. Creators fear the extinction of humanity. The absolute ends of like what could potentially be the result of this. Now, that's real fear mongering. I think that they're taking it a step too far there. But I think it's valid to say that there are risks to this technology. Um, and this was born out of a personal need, really. As I alluded to, we've been looking into the merits of this technology for businesses and charities and organizations for well over 2 years now. And personally, I wanted to validate my own time spent looking into this as the kind of broader discourse became, more people were weighing in on the subject. For myself, I wanted to kind of like verify, have I been looking into something that is worth my time? Is there a broader social purpose to what I'm doing? Am I going to be able to give back to society through the means of this time that I've spent so much time looking into now? And ultimately, it, through the course of this dedicated research into AI for good, I did find the kind of like instances, case studies I was yearning for, and I wanted to impart that back to you today so that we can, all take this hour out of our day to just be optimistic for once about AI. I mean, we give talks on AI and how much it represents a real benefit to some businesses for like productivity improvements, workflows, um, but we still, even during the course of those workshops, recognize that for other spaces, creators like the creative arts, those kind of industries, juniors in every field where getting things wrong and like the need to like have space to learn things rather than like knowing everything all at once. Um, that those are kind of like spaces kind of under threat essentially. So I just wanted to do a bit of a reality check about, what is AI in at least from my limited viewpoint. How have I been able to assess its kind of, as I keep alluding back to, its merits in society today? As I've kind of already said, that the kind of things under threat are what we as humans bring to expertise, or our creativity to not think so formulaically. It's hard to really unpack and define what it is that as an individual, not just what do you bring to your place of business, what do you what how well do you earn, that kind of thing. It's just like what is the unique human value to us, and why would we want to replace have AI replace that? I see lots of people complain about the fact that um, AI is doing the thing I want to do rather than how the companies are pitching it could be used, as in, it's writing all the material about like uh, what your business represents, and then we've got to like go in and write the documentation about how to make that AI think. Couldn't it be the other way where AI is writing the documentation and it's giving us the freedom to like do the job that we love? There's also this like term you may have come across, AI slop. I've recently watched this video. People might be familiar with a YouTube channel. I believe they're from Germany called Kurzgesagt. If you haven't seen this video, I'd really encourage you watching this. They are kind of a think tank YouTube channel, as I say, out of Germany, and they cover lots of like natural science subject matter, things about history, things about prehistoric history, science, physics, chemistry, but like really approachable um, for people who are learning about these subjects for the first time. And they are very rigorous when it comes to their research. That they pay their researchers well. They have lots of due diligence in place before they ever publish something. If they do get things wrong, they own up to it. They publish corrections. And so they recently published a video on this very subject, AI slop, and how pervasive it is becoming on today's modern internet. And it's kind of giving credence to what was once a conspiracy theory around 10 years ago, something known as the dead internet theory, which in a really condensed nutshell suggests that like what you encounter online over the internet is like there's so little actual human element to it. It's mostly just like robots and AIs talking to one another. That was a conspiracy theory back then. It's actually data is suggesting that is the way we're trending to. If you're chronically on YouTube like I am, Every time you go to the comment section of a YouTube video now, you'll see hundreds, if not thousands, of comments just like from bots, and you'll see channels uploading AI generated content with AI generated voiceovers, and then bots are commenting and liking on those videos. So it's an internet, it's an idea of an internet in which we as humans aren't even participating for. And what's the point of that if ultimately the technology is meant to be designed and served for our betterment? So I wanted to hammer this home. We need to be both optimistic about what AI can do in terms of its benefits, while simultaneously remaining vigilant about what its misuse can be. We can't exist in a binary of thinking it's all good or all bad. At least that's my personal opinion. All of this is my personal opinion. Um, and then very recently, well, it's not so recent. I've talked about the idea of the AI bubble for a couple of years now, and whether or not it exists. But more recently, the conversation has shifted somewhat. So when I say bubble, just a quick explainer, that's kind of like you could think of the dot-com bubble in the early 2000s. You could think of the housing crisis in 2008. These are both bubbles in the sense that uh, whether that's private or public investment are propping up the industry, um, so much so that like the value of what people actually pay for it isn't how these companies are or assets are valued on like stock exchanges. Therefore, once the kind of like realization sets in amongst the investment that there will be no significant return on investment, it's all sucked out from the market and everything kind of like crashes out from under it. And that's what people are worried about in the sense of, is this another bubble that exists? Now, I think on both sides of the fence, you have AI skeptics and AI optimists both agreeing that there is a bubble in the sense that the value of AI is one thing, how it's being talked about and overhyped is a step beyond it. And there's this really helpful graphic that Bloomberg News Reporting put out, I think only like 10 days ago. It's a bit like messy when you look at it at a first glance, but I'm not going to go through it in detail. But if you want to go to Bloomberg's article about this, and they explain it really well in detail. But what this is showing in a nutshell is, if you've ever heard of the saying or the analogy, um, during a gold rush, sell shovels. That is something akin to what's happening right now with a company called Nvidia. So Nvidia have experienced a meteoric rise in their value over the past 10 years. They create GPUs and the chips that allow for artificial intelligence, machine learning, these things to work on computers because they're very computationally intensive. So not every computer needs a GPU, but it tended to be that, people who wanted to play high-end video games or wanted to do video editing, or Photoshop kind of software, you would need a GPU for that. But before that, a CPU was fine. Now the graphics card that Nvidia creates are so in demand, all these companies are buying just mostly from Nvidia, and Nvidia is investing back into these companies like OpenAI, like AMD, like Oracle, who create all the data centers, like Microsoft. So they're investing with them, and they have these reciprocal relationships where like they'll say to OpenAI, "We'll give." I'm just pulling numbers out of thin air here now. We'll give you a 1 billion round investment fund if you buy 500 million pounds of our graphics cards, and that's what people say is like a bubble dynamic where it's just companies like giving each other money back and forth. And these valuations in the hundreds of billions and the trillions isn't actually representative of what AI um is actually bringing in revenue. OpenAI only bring in around 12 billion pounds annually. So to have a 500 billion pounds of valuation, it is suggestive of the fact that they're being propped up by private equity, and if like one domino starts to fall, they might all fall. So that's a risk check. I think it's also worth defining what we say when we mean AI, because as I'll get onto in the case studies of AI for good, you'll see in my explanation that they're very specific technologies, but when the term is bandied around on news reporting in headlines on the radio, as I talked about before, um, it's kind of this amorphous blob of everything. It's a boogeyman almost. You know, we're experiencing so much expansion in the tools that are out there that the businesses can use. It seems like every tool that you might have used 5, 6 years ago has an AI feature now, and that it's being rammed down our throat in some sense, whether we like it or not. You know, it's becoming part of our operating systems on our phones. You know, you'll launch up your phone for the first time. It's like, would you like to ask Gemini for something about blah blah blah? I don't know. Um, it's also worth classifying that AI is not the same as AGI. Um, AGI standing for Artificial General Intelligence. Now, what does that mean? Um, in a nutshell, think Terminators, think like robots from iRobots, where they're thinking and reasoning for themselves. The science fiction depiction of AI. That's not what AI is in the market today, at least, and that's not what we're talking about. Ultimately, it's pattern recognition at scale. Um, this very weird illustration kind of gets across my point. Early AI goes back as close to like the late 70s and early 80s, where computers were being trained to recognize and distinguish between what is a cat, what is a dog. And functionally, even today, that's still what AI is. It's computers being trained through patterns to distinguish between one thing and another. It was once binary, you know. Did it have this kind of tail? It was a cat. Did it have these kind of ears? It was a dog. Um, and our advancements in computing and microchips has meant that we can move beyond just the binary this or that, and we can I'll have another illustration to show you how that works, but um, we're not dealing with the boogeyman as some news articles might suggest. Really, it's narrow and task-specific intelligence that has been purpose trained on data for a function to do something which in most cases is just like give us information and knowledge about certain subject matter that already exists. It's not out there creating uh, revelations and innovations. It's assisting people in that regard, but it's very much a tool that is like empowering uh, pre-existing knowledge, because that's how it's been trained. That's the information it's been shown. It doesn't have a brain capable of eureka moments like what we as humans have. So this is I think I have to, I didn't originally have this slide in, but the kind of case studies I'm going to go over, this kind of explanation of how AI works is kind of core to understanding them. I don't want to go in too much in detail for the purpose of this webinar, but if you are interested in learning more of the technicalities of how this AI works, I'd be more than pleased to speak to anyone about that afterwards. But I'm really giving a very, very simple explanation here. Um, oh, wrong way. Sorry. So instead of giving computers explicit rules, such as, if breathing drops below X alert, you could imagine that in a hospital setting. We show these AI machine learning algorithms lots and lots of examples of, let's use my previous example, cats and dogs, and we call that data. And we let them find the patterns using something called, and this is, I'm not going to pretend to really know this topic because it sounds, this is where I'm faking to sound like a data scientist, a convolutional neural network. What on earth does that mean? Well, neural brain. That's what I get out of it, and it relates to this graphic on the right here. The leftmost column, the blue dots, is the data we're giving it. So imagine cat, dog, cat, dog, cat, dog, and these are photos of cats and dogs or descriptions of what cats and dogs are like. And you're allowing the machine learning, the computing that we provided, these GPUs from NVIDIA, to make its own inferences about what makes a dog a dog, what makes a cat a cat, and that first, all these arrows going to the second layer, um, that might be like a dog is generally this size, a cat makes this noise, really simple stuff. But then you can run these layers again and again and again. So we now have the green dots. This might be more complicated things where, like, you know, cats, this breed of cat only exists in China, for these reasons because they were bred this way. It permits the data to get more and more complicated, and then we get to a final build of our AI where the brain is able to really well start distinguishing between cats and dogs. But that can be extrapolated to many other examples. Um, so yeah, I've explained that. They tend to get increasingly complex as the layers go step by step. So all of that's the basics of, I suppose, AI in the broader context, and how it kind of functionally works. Now I'll get into the meat of this talk, AI for good. And this was something that came up early on in my research, and something that I really resonated with, kind of like reaffirmed what I was hoping to get out of this research when I first went into it. And it was to answer that question, does this have purpose? Is what I'm looking into have an impact in society? And I came across this principle that like the advocates, and the professionals in the space doing the work in AI for good have this principle: do no harm. And it's obviously adopted, as you can see from the symbol, from the I forget the name of it, but the practice from the medical fields, and the oaths that doctors have to swear, though I'm not sure, it's not like a legally blinding thing in the practice of medicine, but the idea that they will not make a patient worse by any action with which they are supporting a patient in whatever medical context. And the AI for Good community adopts that very same principle. Um, for them, there is no such thing as the benefits outweigh the costs, or being able to say in the grand scheme of things, we did this thing and 100 people benefited, but 50 people were actually left worse off. They don't permit themselves to make that rationalization. For some people that might not be the kind of principle you want to adhere to. For me, at least in this kind of like space in which we're talking that like AI can be harmful, it was very reaffirming to know that the case studies I was looking into and the reports I was finding out, that like it was almost impossible not to just like feel better about humanity, because as I'm making this point, only beneficiaries exist as a result of this work. If any costs did exist, as I'll show in a slide or two's time, the methodology of AI for good is that you go back to the drawing board. You don't ever like take something to market, set it out to the public where it could be misused. You go back to the drawing board, reevaluate what led you to your ideas and your prototypes to begin with, and you keep workshopping the nature of your solution until a time in which only people stand to benefit from it. And that's because, as I think we're all becoming acutely aware of, the harm that AI, as it scales and scales and scales and becomes more integrated with our lives as like modern working professionals or just citizens of a country, places in which we live, as it becomes more pervasive, it's the chance for it to do harm, it becomes more significant were it to be misused. And so this is what I was alluding to before, the design principles kind of methodology. Now, this isn't unique to AI for Good. I first learned about this methodology from Ben because he comes from a design thinking background. But it's a really simple but an extremely effective way of like thinking about designing services for good. And it's a, as Ben describes it very helpfully, a non-linear iterative principle. What does that mean? Non-linear, it as you can see from this slide, it starts left to right. You empathize with your users, you come to understand them, you find out what they need from technology or just expertise support. You define that, like who's involved, who stands to benefit, who stands to what are the costs of this, and if there are costs, go back, reevaluate. So yeah, who are the stakeholders? Ideate. Okay, how are we going to solve this problem? Is AI even going to be the technology that solves this problem? It doesn't always have to be. AI for Good sometimes can be saying AI isn't the thing that this problem needs. It's something else. Sometimes it's funding. If you're dealing with a certain community or place in the world. But if you have an idea and you think it has merit, you start to prototype it, you build something, and then you take it out, you test it with a select number of users to see has your empathy, has your definitions and ideates, do they work in situ in the real world? But if at any point you're starting to get feedback that suggests this isn't going to work, this is where the non-linear notion of the design principle goes in. You can go back down the chain at any point and start again, and you shouldn't think that like you're that's a failure. That is the nature of creating solutions for modern problems in the world, and one of my case studies is a perfect example of this. And hence why it's non-linear iterative. You do it over and over again until you're happy with the end result, so that once you've reached the final test phase and you think your solution is right and fair and is going to tangibly improve the lives of the people it's meant to support, the stakeholders who you defined in the definition phase, then you launch it into the world. And then you still test it into the future, and yeah, so it never ends. So the case studies. I'm just thinking, how am I doing for time? I've got 23 minutes. Okay, I might race through some of these, but we've got three case studies to talk about, really inspirational narratives. The first is public health, about a country in sub-Saharan Africa that received support from data scientists around neonatal care in a specific like marginalized community in this sub-Saharan country. Climate. This is all about improving the efficacy and efficiency. Sorry, my cat is joining the webinar. Of specifically wind but it has broader applications to renewable energy of kind of all sources. And then disaster relief. We're looking specifically into the immediate response to the Haitian earthquake in 2010. So getting straight into it. Um, the first case study was this public health challenge in the country in sub-Saharan Africa. Now I'm not making specific allusions to where in the world this specifically is, and that'll become obvious later. Um, but in this community, birth asphyxia. So when neonatal defines it's like ages 0 to 6 months. So birth asphyxia for this age range is when babies just can't breathe properly. They're not getting enough oxygen into their lungs, and therefore the oxygen isn't permeating through their body, and generally leads to brain death in a lot of these infants. And it's that at least in this geographic space, which was quite large, it was a leading cause of death in that age range of infants. And it was a problem because triage and detection requires specialized medical professionals. How do you identify birth asphyxia? You're literally just listening to the sound of the baby breathing, and someone who's trained in what that is supposed to sound like should know. I think I can't empathize. Ben might. In that time frame of when it's your firstborn child, and you're listening, you're constantly like worrying about what like your baby's like breathing represents. I think I've seen plenty of videos online where like parents are sleeping close by to a child, and it stops breathing for a second, and that like the parents just like leap into action, and that's kind of just representative of the fact that parents don't know what healthy breathing or just like a very mild symptom in their child is supposed to sound like. So if it is birth asphyxia, the parents won't know it, and because this is a very resource limited setting, the nearest medical professional who would be able to tell them that it was birth asphyxia is like a 3, 4, 5 hour distance away. And by which point, if the brain is being starved of oxygen, that we're talking about fatalities here. So the gap exists. How then do you monitor these vulnerable newborns without like going in and like bringing like loads of medical infrastructure to these places? That we're talking about like significant investment to solve that problem in a traditional sense. So the solution was a machine learning algorithm using that convolutional neural network I showed you before, trained on thousands and thousands of recordings of healthy infants from all across the world, as well as unhealthy infants, the ones experiencing birth asphyxia, so that um, later on the machine learning algorithm that has been trained intensively on the audio and sound of these babies can listen to an entirely new audio recording that it's never heard before, it's never been trained on, and with a 98% accuracy valuation can identify, does this baby have birth asphyxia, yes or no? And in the case of yes, the parent, so the parents in this case, they needed an accessible infrastructure with which to, just like get the recording into the hands of a healthcare professional. So they used the existing SMS texting infrastructure that existed in this space, and launched it out en masse to the public. So people can just text the audio files to a central database, and then the machine learning algorithm analyzes those audio files. Then, if anything is flagged as being potentially a risk of birth asphyxia, the relevant healthcare professional is able to then provide assistance when required. Um, in this instance, the healthcare professionals there in the setting were very much like a part of the creating that solution in the testing and ideation phase. But ultimately, the project wasn't implemented, at least in this localized community, for reasons that are kind of more to do with like the nature of this place in the world. The kind of most impacted communities and the ones who were sending in the SMS messages came from a heavily marginalized community of kind of a religious like element that the kind of like local and national government were extremely it's the word I'm going to say is harsh, but that's an understatement of like what that meant. And yeah, sorry, targeted for persecution is more accurate. And so what they realized was they would have needed more healthcare professionals who weren't as specialized, who weren't as validated there in this regional setting in order to continue training and continue delivering these services. And the risk of like making the location data of like where these parents and babies were, and like their means of like getting out and supporting them, were that to get into the hands of the persecutors, the risk therefore was like so insurmountable that like they couldn't roll back and ideate a solution that got around that because it was so reliant on the healthcare setting there in that community. So it ultimately wasn't rolled out. Now you might say that like you might your own principles say that the good might have outweighed the negatives, i.e., so many babies were saved. Um, but thankfully this technology wasn't just like shelved. That there are many other companies, many other tech startups, um, around the world who are pursuing this same kind of algorithmic learning around birth asphyxia. There's a great company called Ubenwa Health who have done TEDx talks on this subject matter, and they're based in Canada. But the nature of their study is for like marginalized communities in Africa. So I would encourage you to like go and look and see the work that they're doing, and don't feel disheartened that like the just because like it wasn't like t fully rolled out in this setting, it doesn't mean that like an impact wasn't made. This technology continues to be developed to this day. Second case study is the challenge about our switch over to renewable energy, um, and the kind of like inherent challenges. In this instance, we're talking purely about wind and wind farms, and this comes from a wind farm. The context of this like simulation was the Chinese government put out a kind of open tender to data scientists the world over that they had a collection of data spanning back 10 years, various data points about one particular wind farm in China. And they put out a challenge to that people they wanted them through machine learning AI to improve the efficacy, the ability of like wind farms to just be better at producing energy, because that one of the inherent challenges is just well, it's just nature. Wind doesn't blow all the time. There's also just like challenges to the way societies are structured when it comes to creating power. This was something I didn't really understand that well before looking to this topic, is that power grids, and it's the same for here in the UK, don't like create like an abundance of power and just use it as and when it's needed. Grid operators have to constantly keep like, here's the demand, here's what we're producing. If the demand goes up, we're producing. If the demand goes down, we're producing less. They've got to constantly meet that fine line of like constant consumption because excess energy, excess electricity is as much a problem as too little. So much so that here in the UK, we pay other countries to take our electricity off of us, um, because it's like where does it go? It's kind of dangerous to have too much of it. So the intermittent nature of wind, but this could be the same for solar, this could be the same for hydro, means that grid operators, at least historically, can't accurately forecast how much energy they're going to have in a world in which we're entirely reliant on renewable energy sources. And were we to like roll out totally on like say the UK government said we're just going to use wind power from today and that'll be it, the likelihood is that we would fall short, and what that means is we have to have fossil fuel plants ready to go and turn on and burn fossil fuels at the turn of a switch. And these plants exist in most countries whereby like within 15 minutes they can go from cold to like fully burning and full producing full energy. Whereas a wind farm, you can't just say, all right, I need more power, turn that wind farm on. You have to know when the wind is going to blow, and that's why forecasting is so important. So with this huge data set that was provided by the Chinese government, neural networks, the again that graph I was showing you before, and the convolutional neural network is able to be trained on so much temporal data. So temporal meaning like a space in time, and the patterns that exist in that. So how much were the turbines moving? What was the wind speed? Where in like a 360-degree angle was the turbine positioned? Was it facing north, south, east, west? Um, what was the temperature like internal within the blades, within the structure? What was the temperature like internal? What was the moisture level? All of this um, is how meteorologists, people who predict the weather, yeah, like the Met Office, this is how they create weather predictions. So we have an abundance of this data, um, but there's also not in the context of needing to train these neural networks. There's also not a lot, so they need more than what was given, and that's the data scientists call this synthetic noise. That's a fancy word for saying like kind of adding some like not real um training data, which will actually still improve the model's performance, the machine learning AI, because it's like a permutation. It's a really easy example is sometimes you can like train in it like I was talking about before, cats and dogs. Um, you don't always need to give it if you wanted to train it on a photo of two cats, you don't need to like just give it photo of cat one, photo of cat two. You can give it photo of cat one and then reverse the image of cat one. You can give it and then you can give it like black and white or really high color saturation, or you can like flip it so it's upside down. And so from that one photo, you're actually getting lots and lots of like different variations of synthetic noise. So it's still the same original photo of a cat, but there's actually 10, 20, 50 different data points you can give to it. So they did that for this to improve the machine learning. And there's a research from Google who assisted in this technology. It actually outperforms traditional forecasting, which meant that grid operators, the impact of that, they were 20% more accurate within a 24-hour prediction window, and that just means ultimately we can be more reliant uh, on renewable energies into the future, thereby reducing our need on these backup fossil fuel plants. However, there is still inherent limitations in this space. We can somewhat accurately predict what the weather will look like in a 24-hour window, but as many with you will be able to empathize, as that becomes a week, a month, a year, our predictions really fall short. So they're constantly looking into ways into improving that. And then the final case study is this disaster which occurred back in 2010. I can still recall the news reporting from that time. Haiti experienced a 7.0 magnitude earthquake. It's kind of hard to, here in the UK, never having experienced an earthquake, it's hard to really empathize with what that kind of means. But you only need to look at the pictures and see like how extremely heavily affected the country was at the time, and how huge of a disaster response there was in relation to it, just so that people could like survive day to day in response to it. Now, one of the inherent challenges about the earthquake happening where it did is the majority of speakers on the island of Haiti speak a language called Haitian Creole, and that is a very, at least back then in 2010, the majority of first responders came from North America, and so little of them spoke Haitian Creole. So when people were asking for help in Haitian Creole, first responders like really couldn't help them because they didn't know what help they needed. They were giving things, but they didn't know if what they were giving was the right thing. Um, so what data scientists did was they reached out to the global diaspora, so people who traveled all over the world who came from Haiti, Haitian families, and spoke Haitian Creole, and they created a central database, and it was like a web browser where people could like listen to or like read text that like people were sending again to a centralized text-based service, and they were sitting there translating at the same time training a machine learning algorithm. This meant that over time, the machine learning algorithm could just automatically do these translations, and first responders could just do this in their own time. They weren't reliant on the global community of translators. I'm now going to just like really rush through because I realize I'm over time. Um, so essentially, it meant that like disaster response was just way more efficient. It also, in general, just improved translation software. Google adopted this same algorithm, and it's the reason why Google Translate was like improved a lot in the years after. And it demonstrated the capacity for like a really engaged and unified community of like global volunteers and activists translating Haitian Creole in partnership with AI could improve the life of these population during a disaster scenario. So some of the common threads that have come up in these case studies, I'm just going to read these verbatim so I can get through them. They augment human experience and judgment. They haven't replaced them. Humans have very much been in the loop from the outset in the planning and delivering of these, where we're not being pushed to the sidelines. They've been extremely cost effective as opposed like the example I talked about with in Africa, as opposed to like building all these facilities. If something can be done off site and using existing technology, it's extremely cost effective. And they begin and end by understanding what do the stakeholders need from these solutions. But there's also been limitations. Data is often a tool for exploitation, so that the places in the around the world where these technologies have been implemented, researchers have found time and again that they are often exploited by people in power because they know communities will like put forward their data to improve these technologies, and they'll use that same data to then make them vulnerable. Also, bias can't be eliminated from algorithm. The people who train them, the data that trains them informs the bias that like naturally exists within those algorithms. Um, and that, yeah, there's an unpredictability about where these future applications could go from the future. So my key takeaways from everything I've talked about: AI is a tool. It's not inherently good or evil. It's how we as humans use it. The application of one technology has wide-reaching effects. As I say, with the Haiti case, just translation software was massively improved as a whole for all languages through Google Translate. In the case of just trying to sort this one problem for the Haitian Creole language. And as you'll have kind of guessed, accurate data is a core underpinning of these projects and how they are successful. Now, I'm sorry, I really went over time there. If you have to get away at 1 o'clock bang on, I take no offense. That's my fault. But if anyone does have any questions, please just like either put them in the chat now, or Ben might have answered some already. Um,
Great.
sorry.
Thanks for that, Nathan. No,
I hope that was helpful.
no, yeah, thanks for that, Nathan. No, that's great. Just for anyone who doesn't need to jump off, you should be getting an email. Just to, like, if you wouldn't mind, like, quickly taking 2 minutes to just respond to that. Any feedback, that would be great. Just so we can report to our funders, the Northeast Combined Authority, to let them know, that we're hopefully providing some sort of value. I've got just a couple of questions here. We'll try and get through them, Nathan. So, one is these examples seem quite specialized for someone working in another industry besides those that you've mentioned. Where would you start if you wanted to explore whether AI could solve a problem someone else is facing? What would you say is the first step?
Well, I would say, and I kind of alluded to it back here when I say AI is a tool, and with the earlier slide about the design thinking principle, AI doesn't necessarily always need to be the solution. Think more from a problem-led perspective, depending on the kind of space you're working in, the AI, the for good initiative that you're trying to improve. Maybe it's something that you personally resonate with, or you've found a problem that exists out in the world. Don't like that analogy of like to a hammer, everything's a nail. Don't think that AI needs to be the solution to everything, even though right now in the kind of conversation of the world, it feels like everything's moving that way. Um, just be really problem led. Be led by the community that you're trying to support, the people for whom this is a first-hand experience and will stand to gain from the work that you want to achieve. Um, yeah, just come at it from a problem-led solution first.
Great, thanks for that, Nathan. And how could people in attendance like get involved in AI for good initiatives? How could they, contribute to doing good? How can they get involved?
Yeah, great question. I th there's if you know there's like a job listing board called 80,000 hours. That's kind of predicated on the idea that everyone generally has around 80,000 hours in their like work life. That's the culmination of who you are, and their kind of marketing angle is, how do you want to spend that time? Um, and so they advertise jobs that like are very much for societal impact at a broad global scale. So you might want to look there if you're thinking that like you're not like totally fulfilled in the work that you're doing today. Maybe it is a career change. The Good Things Foundation, that's an extremely important kind of organization that exists here in the UK. Um, look into their work. They're always looking for volunteers to support their initiatives all over the UK. But then also don't feel that you need to become like an AI data science expert. As I've alluded to in some of these case studies, sometimes the most important thing is just having good and accurate data. You might be the person that's helping find that data, is helping clean that data, so that the data scientists who are then training the machine learning and AI, just they will be so much more better set up for success. So don't feel put off if like the kind of the technicalities of training AI is not your forte or not how you want to get involved. Be more on the end of like how do we get more involved with the communities that need AI for good solutions? How can we support them, and what data would we need from them in order to create potential solutions that fit their needs, and how best to collect that. That's what I would say.
Brilliant. And one last one. This is on the AI slop that you mentioned earlier on. So when you look at like these positive case studies versus that with the risk of misinformation, low quality content, how do you personally weigh up whether AI is on balance either a positive or negative for society?
Yeah, so as I kind of like really quickly said here on this slide, AI is a tool. It has no, even though we the news calls it the boogeyman, it has no good or evil nature. It's how we this is what I feel. This is how we decide to use it. So AI could be catastrophic if we just point it at cheap content generation and the world just becomes a place where AI slop is just drowning out expertise. But equally, if we find important initiatives like infant asphyxiation, like renewable energy, and we spend our time pursuing that instead, then the technology it's just like anything. It's just a tool. It's how we as people are deciding to spend our time. So I suppose I need to do this webinar again and again and again. I need to be an advocate for AI for good and just instruct people that we can do better because there are certainly enough people out there trying to do worse.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Nathan. Well, I think that's been really, really good, and I've definitely picked up a couple of things. So, no, very, very insightful. But yeah, thanks. Just to wrap up, thanks very much for joining in, everyone. As I say, we will circulate the recording link if you did have to drop off. But yeah, thanks very much. And if you've got any questions, then reach out to the team at Digital Pathfinders. We'll be happy to talk about how we can support your business. And likewise, if there's any other topics you'd like us to discuss and talk about, we can let us know and we can kind of filter that into our future calendar of events. But thanks very much, everyone.
Thanks so much. Take care and enjoy the rest of your days.
Cheers. Bye bye now, everyone.